I just am so frustrated. Like, as a doctor, it's my job to take care of my community. That's my job. You doctors that are watching this, and I see a lot of you right here, why are you not getting loud? I just told you the fake news about the kid in Louisiana. There was a baby that was born 22 weeks early because the mother had tested positive for COVID-19, went into distress, forced the baby to go into labor, and the baby died. And the headlines were "Baby dies of coronavirus." It's time to pull your cranium out of your rectum and wake up and go, what the hell's really going on right now? Because there's a lot of crazy shit happening in the world and a lot of fake news. So I'm going to encourage every one of you, wherever you're at in the world right now, see behind the curtain. It's like that movie, The Wizard of Oz, when the great and powerful Oz is there, and Dorothy and Toto and the Tin Man are all there, and they're all scared to death because this big fire-breathing man is telling them this is what's going on. And what's really happens, Toto goes and pulls the curtain back, and we see that there's a little old senile man behind the curtain that doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. That's what's happening in our system right now, and you're being lied to.
What if the whole anti-fake news campaign was an effort on somebody's part to keep us from seeing or believing certain websites and stories by controversializing them or labeling them as fake news? But who would want to do such a thing? As an investigative journalist, I found myself with a few questions about the emergence of fake news as a phrase and as a fad. Number one, what is fake news and what is not? Number two, when did fake news begin? And number three, most interesting of all, I've investigated the shadowy multi-billion-dollar industry that seeks to manipulate all of us through news, social media, and online.
Got to be especially wary of journalists when they're all saying the same thing.
Well, if you filled up your gas tank lately, then you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you gas prices are on the rise. I know.
It is 19 minutes past the hour. Welcome back, everybody. Those without a sweetheart this Valentine's Day may look to their smartphone or tablet to help direct Cupid's arrow their way, while those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
And those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may use their mobile device to help say, I love you.
Those with one may look to their device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Oh. Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
Those with a special someone may look to their mobile device to help them say, I love you.
That's with a special someone may use their mobile device to help say, I love you.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about troubling trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
the sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media.
I did a little digging and I traced the effort to a nonprofit called First Draft, which appears to be about the first to use the phrase fake news in its modern context. On September 13th, 2016, First Draft announced a partnership to tackle malicious hoaxes and fake news reports. The goal was supposedly to separate wheat from chaff, to prevent unproven conspiracy talk from figuring prominently in internet searches, to relegate today's version of the alien baby story to a special internet oblivion. Exactly 1 month later, President Obama chimed in. He insisted in a speech that he too thought somebody needed to step in and curate information in this wild, wild west media environment. Nobody in the public had been clamoring for any such thing, yet suddenly, the topic of fake news dominates headlines on a daily basis. It's as if the media have been given its marching orders.
Got to be especially wary of journalists when they're all saying the same thing.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish fake stories simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Fake news, they insisted, was an imminent threat to American democracy. A noted propagandist told me, "It's like a movie," he said, and it gave me chills at the time. Nearly every scene or image that crosses our path in daily life, he said, was put there for a reason, often by someone who paid a lot of money to place it there. When connecting the dots, I find it often helps to follow the money. I wanted to know who was funding the nonprofit First Draft and its anti-fake news effort. I found the answer. It was Google. Google's parent company Alphabet was run by a man named Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt, as it happens, had devoted himself to Hillary Clinton's election campaign, offered himself up as a campaign advisor, and became a top multi-million-dollar donor to it. His company funded First Draft around the start of the election cycle. Not surprisingly, Hillary was soon to jump aboard the anti-fake news train, and her surrogate David Brock of Media Matters privately told donors he was the one who convinced Facebook to join the effort. I'm not the only one who thinks the whole thing smacked of the rollout of a propaganda campaign. Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept wrote, "The most important fact you need to realize is that those who most loudly denounce fake news are typically the ones most aggressively disseminating it." But I can tell you there are two ways to tell that powerful interests might be trying to manipulate your opinion. Number one, when the media seems to be trying to shape or censor facts and opinions rather than report them. Number two, when so many in the media are reporting the same stories, promulgating the same narratives, relying on the same sources, even using the same phrases.
You've got to be especially wary of journalists when they're all saying the same thing.
In consumer news, economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some of the spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take the spring out of the step of the Easter Bunny this year.
I mean, think of it. There are literally thousands of legitimate news stories that could be reported in a given day, and an infinite number of ways to report them. When everybody's on the same page, it might be the result of an organized campaign.
Away. The demand is still there. It's not slowing down. As you can see behind me, this line, John, has started forming even earlier this morning, and it's even longer at this hour. People waiting in the cold to get care. The hospital tells us every day they're working to increase the capacity of this hospital by flooding it with nurses and doctors and equipment just to keep up with this demand.
Elmhurst Hospital in Queens is now the epicenter of the 5 boroughs. So many people lined up to get testing, confirmed cases there. Doctors and nurses are inundated.
Elmhurst Hospital, as you said, has really become the hot zone. Every single day, patients are lining up outside here, many of them with cold and flu-like symptoms. They come here to be tested.
It doesn't matter what you say 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You've got to go with what the situation on the ground is.
I've been here for an hour. Not one person has walked up to the tents. Not one. Okay? So, and look at all the ambulances down the block. You see any ambulances? Look at, more people are taking videos because no one's believing the fake media. You see all the ambulances that are on the block down there? They're all parked. They've been there for an hour.
I'm standing outside of the Elmhurst Hospital Center in Queens, New York, and according to the media, this is the epicenter of the apocalypse. But it sure looks like a ghost town to me. Look on the YouTube, the CBS News, long lines of people trying to get tested. I don't see that.
With the growing number of patients as supplies dwindle, you can see barricades behind us set up here outside of the hospital to keep order here because so many have been lining up every day to get tested. 13 people have died at this hospital in Queens, while outside it's swamped with New Yorkers waiting in long lines to get tested for the coronavirus. The numbers in the city are still rapidly growing.
It doesn't matter what you say 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You've got to go with what the situation on the ground is.
I don't see anything wrong.
It doesn't matter what you say 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You've got to go with what the situation on the ground is.
Big booty, what you got a big booty. Big, big booty, what you got a big booty. Big, big booty, what you got a big booty. Big, big booty, what you got a big booty.
Repeat what you just said, please.
Well, last Friday, I received a 7-page document that sort of told me that if I had an 86-year-old patient that had pneumonia but was never tested for COVID-19, but sometime after she came down with pneumonia, we learned that she had been exposed to her son, who had no symptoms, but later on was identified with COVID-19, that it would be appropriate to diagnose on the death certificate COVID-19. Now, we've not done that. If someone has the pneumonia after and it's in the middle of a flu epidemic, and I don't have a test on influenza, I don't diagnose influenza on the death certificate. I will say this elderly patient died of pneumonia.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but my heart is sinking right now as you're telling me this. You're a doctor. Why in the world would they be sending you out information to fill out death certificates, whether the person's been diagnosed with COVID-19 or not, but then to say in the death certificate this person's death was caused by COVID-19? That does not sound right to me.
Dr. Annie Bukacek is a board-certified internal medicine physician. She's been practicing medicine for over 30 years.
I've been filling out death certificates for over 30 years. Inquiring minds want to know, are the reported deaths from COVID-19 truly deaths from COVID-19?
Last week there was a story out of Connecticut where the governor came out, tweeted, and said a child, an infant, died in Connecticut of coronavirus. And then the parents came out and said, no, my child did not die of coronavirus. My child had an accident at home and died from that. It is just crazy.
If someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death.
Now, I can't imagine if someone comes in with coronavirus, goes to an ICU, and they have an underlying heart condition and they die, they're going to say cause of death, heart attack. I cannot see that happening.
According to Professor Walter Ricciardi, is the scientific advisor to Italy's Minister of Health. This is what he said. He said the way in which we code deaths in our country is very generous in the sense that all people who die in hospitals with the coronavirus are deemed to be dying of the coronavirus. On re-evaluation by the National Institute of Health, only 12% of death certificates have shown a direct causality from coronavirus, while 88% of patients who have died have at least one premorbidity. Many had 2 or 3. My next guest is a doctor and state senator in Minnesota who is deeply troubled by the CDC's latest guidance for counting COVID deaths. Dr. Scott Jensen joins me now.
Anytime healthcare intersects with dollars, it gets awkward. Right now, Medicare has determined that if you have a COVID-19 admission to the hospital, you'll get paid $13,000. If that COVID-19 patient goes on a ventilator, you get $39,000, 3 times as much. Nobody can tell me after 35 years in the world of medicine that sometimes those kinds of things impact on what we do.
When governments are making massive changes that affect our constitutional rights, and those changes are based on inaccurate statistics, it does matter. History-changing decisions are being made due to these figures, despite the fact that they are flat out wrong.
Are they overworking you inside there, man? It's bad?
It's not as bad as you think.
It's not as bad as I think?
Yeah, it's strange, but don't want to say one way or another tonight.
But I see on TV that, it's chaos.
Everything you see on TV, someone thinks.
I'm going to switch it up. Because I come here and everything is normal.
I run the trauma center down at Kings County, and the deaths that we're seeing, everybody who dies has coronavirus on their death certificate. Everybody who ends up having anything go on has coronavirus on their death certificate. And we're bringing in a bunch of people from out of town. We get doctors coming in from Nebraska who don't know what the hell they're doing. A lot of people die because of it. I don't know if it's coronavirus or if it was just a breakdown of the health system and we finally scared ourselves shitless. It's very bizarre and I don't want to comment.
To drive this home, we need to understand how the CDC and National Vital Statistics System are instructing physicians to fill out death certificates related to COVID-19. Brace yourselves and please pay attention and let what I'm about to tell you sink in. The assumption of COVID-19 death can be made even without testing. Based on assumption alone, the death can be reported to the public as another COVID-19 casualty. The March 24th, 2020 National Vital Statistics System memo states, and I quote, "The rules for coding and selection of the underlying cause of death are expected to result in COVID-19 being the underlying cause more often than not." End of quote.
And oh, by the way, don't you think it's really interesting if you look at the stats of how not right now all the COVID-19 coronavirus deaths are rising? Guess what's dropping massively? Deaths from pneumonia, deaths from the flu, and deaths from heart disease and heart attacks. Don't you think it's a bit ironic? What, are people not dying from heart attacks anymore? Are people not dying from pneumonia? Are they not dying from the flu? Nope. Apparently COVID-19 and coronavirus fixed that. So now every person that dies now, for the most part, is getting labeled, toe tagged with COVID-19 coronavirus.
Why would they want to skew the number of deaths due to COVID-19?
Well, fear is a great way to control people.
First thing that I really recommend everyone to do is to turn off the television and the mainstream media, because everything that they say is to make you afraid.
I'll leave you with a final thought and a warning. It's about a new catchphrase being bandied about, media literacy, as in we'll tell you who to trust and who not to trust. Media literacy advocates are busy trying to get state laws passed to require that their version of media literacy be taught in public schools. They're developing websites as resources for journalists and the public. They're partnering with universities. I think media literacy is a new name promoted by some of the same people who want to tell you what to believe.
We're not just fighting an epidemic, we're fighting an infodemic.
What he's talking about is the rapid global spread of false information. During my research, I came across 3 types of fake news and misinformation regarding the coronavirus.
What about some of the stories that are confusing? Which are then also wrapped up in what we would now say was fake news.
Yeah. Those are all fake news stories about coronavirus.
As new cases of the coronavirus continue to creep up, so too does the misinformation that's out there as well. Fake posts.
How do you handle an epidemic in the age of fake news? There are the carefully orchestrated official messages.
I fully understand public concern.
Science-based, driven by expert advice.
Currently, the evidence from China, at least, would imply that children have much less of this disease.
Backed up by advertising and the mainstream media.
This is not real journalism, people.
People with their own agendas using terms designed to fool you into thinking they're neutral authorities. What you need to remember is that when interests are working this hard to shape your opinion, their true goal might just be to add another layer between you and the truth.
There was not a single person who had
these symptoms who had millions of copies of coronavirus isolated from their blood or sputum. And then they did not do an examination, an electron microscope, of 500 normal people. Now, the people who wrote the articles then said, and I quote, "We did not attempt to purify the virus," which, if you think about it, is mind-boggling. Because if they didn't purify the virus, how do they know that that was the cause of the disease? And the answer is there's no way to know that. But they did take the virus and they did a genetic sequence of it. They said, this is a new genetic sequence which we haven't seen in a coronavirus before. Therefore, this is the cause of the disease. And all I can say is this flies in the face of everything we know about virology.
I'm spending day and night studying and learning this information. I mean, I'm not sitting idle. Like, as soon as I get off here, I have a stack of papers to read and to continue going with my research.
Now, there was a paper that came out where they had to estimate the false positive rate because you can't calculate it since there's no gold standard to compare it against. And they actually reported an estimated rate of 80%. In people without symptoms. So what that means is if you got tested, let's say you were exposed to somebody who tested positive, or you traveled or something like that, and you want to get tested, or you're asked to get tested, there would be 4 out of 5 times that there was a positive result, there would actually be no illness. There's actually additional error even beyond what I've described.
Should we start with the biggest question of all? Do you believe there's a virus in the first place?
No, I do not.
Rashid Buttar. He graduated from Washington University with a double major in biology and theology before attending medical school at the University of Osteopathic Medicine and Health Sciences College of Medicine and Surgery. He trained in general surgery and emergency medicine and served as brigade surgeon and director of emergency medicine while serving in the U.S. Army. He is a board-certified clinical metal toxicology and preventative medicine. He is board eligible in emergency medicine and has achieved fellowship status in 3 separate medical societies. Today, he serves as the medical director for the Centers for Advanced Medicine with clinics in California and North Carolina. These clinics specialize in the needs of patients with immune dysfunctions and toxicity issues. For over 20 years, he has been ranked as one of the top 50 doctors in the United States. His first book, The 9 Steps to Keep the Doctor Away, became a Wall Street Journal, USA Today, an Amazon bestseller, and is now an international best-selling book translated into multiple languages. Now this week, a video he made called out the fraud that is being perpetuated across the world by the World Health Organization, the CDC, Bill Gates, the deep state, the mainstream media. It went viral with millions of views worldwide. Doctor, welcome to the program.
And Fox, or was it New York Post, put out, it seems like that the 6 feet of social distancing is not going to be sufficient. It needs to go to 13 feet. There is no virus, bacteria that jumps 13 feet. It's just, it defies every logical aspect of science and medicine. And what really, really pisses me off is that there are thousands, tens of thousands of doctors and scientists out there that know that this is a fraud, and they're not saying anything. Either one, they're scared of social ostracization because they're going to be called out, or social shaming, or they're afraid of that they're going to lose their license. For God's sake, this is changing the planet, and every scientist and every doctor that knows this to be a facade needs to open their mouth and speak. There is every aspect of science has just been literally picked up, thrown in the toilet, and flushed down. It's like everybody's ignoring it. The fundamental aspects of how the human system works is being ignored. Physiology is being just put in the garbage bin. Every aspect of virology and infectious disease is being ignored. Koch's postulate has been ignored. Every aspect. Then we've got false positives coming from testing that we know is not adequate, and then the testing that they are doing, like the RT-PCR, the real-time polymerase chain reaction testing, that's already been shown. It was actually the guy who developed it in the 1980s, Mullis, said that you cannot use this testing for diagnostic purposes. You have to use it only for the where something has a genomic sequence that's already been identified. You can't use it for diagnosis. yet they're using it for diagnosis. And when that's not enough to justify the number of deaths that they've created this pandemic for, they're causing doctors and nurses to go back and change the death certificates to say COVID-19 is the first cause of death. And if that's not enough, now there are mandates being sent to every state, every doctor from every state medical board saying that there's no necessity to test. I got a letter like this myself. If they have symptoms, send them home. And then the mandate of listing the cause of death is COVID-19. The media propagating footage of hospitals and from one country to another country using the same footage, the same person dying multiple times, use of mannequins to show that the people are dying, and yet they can't even show ambulances that are doing anything. They're all parked. They're all sitting there. People are playing chess. They're playing card games because they're so idle. Nurses are being laid off right now because there's not enough work. But they're pushing this agenda of fear, fear, fear. The fear mongering itself will increase your adrenal output, will cause more stress, more emotional distraught. The emotional aspect, one side, now you're talking about the financial aspect. People are going to get stressed. Guess what that does? It reduces your immune system and makes you susceptible to viruses, bacteria, to many other things. But then to create this illusion over something like COVID-19, which nobody has yet demonstrated a single death from the actual virus, from the proper, established, accepted methodology that a virus has caused this death. Nobody's been able to do that. It's all based upon PCR testing. And Gary, I don't know whether you know this or not, all the way back to 1984, all the way up to now, 2018, there are multiple studies that show that if you've had the flu shot, especially the trivalent flu shot, false positives on COVID-19 testing. God knows what's been injected into people over the years. They really want to know cause of death. I want to know how many of these people that are supposedly died from COVID-19, which, by the way, still the numbers are less than the seasonal flu. The number of deaths are still less than the seasonal flu. But I want to know how many of these people that died of supposed COVID-19 actually had a history of a vaccination, an adult vaccination in the last 10 years. That's what I want to know, because the studies clearly show that if you've had a flu shot, you're going to test positive for COVID-19. So you got all this other stuff that's going on. They can't justify the numbers, so they're going to change the death certificates. They can't justify the numbers, so they're going to take different footage of different people and then attribute that to COVID-19. They just had, CBS had that nurse that was crying, saying, please give me a face mask so that I can take care of people, and I don't want to risk my family getting them infected. And then they find out that hasn't worked in a hospital in a year and a half, and she's some kind of a social media model. The amount of misrepresentation, deception, diversion tactics to keep the public from knowing the truth, it's just unbelievable.
At the age of 14 in 1978, invented email. Yes, the inventor and copyright holder of email. Oh yes, Dr. Shiva, welcome to the Next News Network.
Great to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me.
You posted something last week that I reported on your tweet, and this is where you said that the CV fear, the fear-mongering by the deep state, will go down in history as one of the biggest frauds to manipulate economies, suppress dissent, and push mandated medicine.
The medical system we're moving towards is a top-down system, totally controlled by big pharma, big ag, and big vaccine manufacturers. They were going to scare the hell out of people with the coronavirus to essentially say, we need to do this for the quote-unquote common good. That's what we're seeing go on. What they're saying is there's this boogeyman called the virus, and you need the vaccine to help you stop that, okay? Boogeyman, savior. Savior's Bill Gates, Clinton Global Initiative, etc., big pharma.
I'm envisioning a time where we're going to see the same thing. Coronavirus vaccine is free for everyone today, right? So that's, I think, a future.
Well, it's going to be even more. It's going to even be more unfortunate than that. It'll be, oh, Gary, your driver's license is coming up for renewal. Did you get all your vaccines? You can't travel. Hey, you can't take the train or the bus. Hey, you can't go to the gym. You can't go here. This is where this is headed. A gym will say, well, we can't allow you in here, Gary. We don't want to harm all of our other people. This entire thing is a master setup. It's chess move after chess move. And it's brought to you by Anthony Fauci. Fauci knows what he's doing. He is the face of pharma and vaccines, and he sees his opportunity to become, the hero in all of this.
Bill Gates, thank you very much for joining us on BBC Breakfast. I just wonder if I could first ask you, how important is it now to have a global response?
Well, I'd say it's critical because the tools that are going to reduce deaths, the
the drugs, that's a global thing to get those out. And the thing that'll get us back to the world that we had before coronavirus is the vaccine and getting that out to all 7 billion people.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds the WHO, the NIH, the CDC, and the UN. And now he is saying that until we get mass vaccinations, we might never be able to gather in groups.
And which activities like mass gatherings may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
The president's coronavirus response team are all pushing the Bill Gates vaccination agenda. Dr. Fauci is on the leadership council for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In January of 2017, Anthony Fauci told a crowd at Georgetown University that there would be a surprise outbreak during the Trump presidency.
There is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
Deborah Birx is a board member for the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, which was founded by the Gates Foundation and known for millions of dollars of fraudulent misuse of funds. In October of 2019, Bill Gates sponsored Event 201, a simulation that estimated 65 million people killed by coronavirus. In November of 2019, the Purebright Institute, funded by Bill Gates, was granted European patent number EP3172319B1 for a coronavirus vaccine that may be used to treat humans. Today, Dr. Fauci says the virus will keep coming back, and he says the ultimate game changer will be a new vaccine. In Australia, the Prime Minister is telling people the shutdown will last months, that it's the new normal, and that the only way out of your homes is to accept the vaccine. There is no proof that vaccines are the answer. In fact, the CDC admitted in federal court that it does not have studies to support the claim that vaccines do not cause autism. A top UN scientist admitted that vaccines are killing people. It is time to do some hard thinking. Will you allow your government to impose forced vaccinations?
Can you imagine a time where Americans carry certificates of immunity?
That's possible. I mean, it's one of those things that we talk about when we want to make sure that we know who the vulnerable people are and not. This is something that's being discussed. I think it might actually have some merit under certain circumstances.
We are looking at an immunity certificate, how we can, how people who have had the disease have got the antibodies and therefore have immunity can show that and so get back as much as normal as much as possible to normal life. That is an important thing that we will be doing and are looking at.
Eventually, what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world where you'll have some countries that won't have it under control. Sadly, you don't want to completely block off the ability for those, people to go there and come back and move around. So eventually there will be sort of this digital immunity proof that will help facilitate the global reopening up.
When everybody's on the same page, it might be the result of an organized campaign.
ID 2020 and their global ID and vaccination program. Going to ID 2020's website, it's obvious they are gung-ho on creating a global ID, but their alliance is important. Who is behind ID 2020? As we can see, Accenture, Microsoft, the Rockefeller Foundation, and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. Gavi, the Vaccination Alliance, is one of the founding and main contributing members, of which we know Bill and Melinda Gates founded in 1999 with with $750 million. And why do you think ID 2020 announced just before the outbreak in September of 2019 this? ID 2020 and partners launch a program to provide digital ID with vaccines. Who else is behind it? Well, as we can see, another founding member is the Rockefeller Foundation. If you know anything about the Rockefellers, you know they are basically American royalty. They are a family of the Illuminati, one of the controlling families from across this world. And the webs of power they have spread into the far reaches of every aspect of society. Just look at the groups involved with both the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the CIA, the Federal Reserve, literally every other charitable or global brand. May of 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation releases this report in collaboration with the Global Business Network, Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. And on page 18, we get a glimpse into their future world. They call it Lockstep, and it's a world of tighter top-down governmental control and more authoritarian leadership, with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. And they start this off with a prediction. 2012, a pandemic hits. Remember, this was written in 2010, which infects 20% of the population and kills 8 million people. The pandemic is also deadly on economies. International mobility of both people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries, breaking supply chains, and locally shops and office buildings sat empty for months. The United States is blamed for accelerating the spread for its leniency, while countries like China fared better as they enforced a strict and mandatory quarantine for all citizens. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control of oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms. Biometric IDs for all citizens. Over the weekend, Mi Pasa was announced, which doesn't that sound like My Pass in Spanish? Yeah, it does. So what is Mi Pasa? According to their website, it's a global scale control and communication system that enables a swift and more precise early detection of COVID-19 carriers and infection hotspots through seamless and fully private information sharing between individuals, state authorities, and health institutions, such as hospitals and HMOs, utilizing advanced technological tools and a dedicated user app. But who is involved? Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, Hasera, the World Health Organization, and countries around the globe, the US CDC, the Chinese CDC, the European CDC, and more. Mi Pasa, the blockchain-based coronavirus data and information sharing network, is being built. My Pass, and if you don't have it, your world may be shut off for good.
That's what's happening in our system right now, and you're being lied to.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!" I want you to get up right now. Get up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change."
How many stations does this go out?
You've got to get mad.
67.
Say,
I know it goes to Louisville and Atlanta.
I'm not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. But first, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out and yell, and say, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore."
Who are you talking to, Herb?
CGG Atlanta.
Are they yelling in Atlanta, Herb?
Are they yelling in Atlanta, Ted? But first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore."
They're yelling in Baton Rouge.
Get up out of your chair.
Son of a bitch! We struck the mother lode!
Stick your head out of the window, open it, then stick your head out and keep yelling and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore." Just get up from your chairs right now. Go to the window.
Where are you going? I don't want to see if anybody's
Go
yelling.
to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell and keep yelling. I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take this anymore.
I'm mad as hell! I'm not gonna take it anymore!
I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore.